Imagine this for a second. You've just shipped $1 million worth of cutting-edge electronics across the Pacific. Midway through the journey, a massive storm hits, containers shift, and yours plunges straight into the dark, icy depths of the ocean. Panic sets in, right? You immediately wonder, am I covered? Surely the shipping company is going to reimburse me for this. Well, the harsh reality of global logistics is that the answer really isn't a simple yes. It all comes down to the microscopic fine print of the legal contracts governing that specific voyage.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to be taking a magnifying glass to the Ocean Network Express, or ONE, Bill of Lading Terms and Conditions. Now, I know what you're thinking, but this isn't just some boring legal document. You really need to think of this as a crucial survival guide for global shipping. We're going to decode the dense legal jargon together and show you exactly what happens behind the scenes of international trade. By the end of this, you will understand exactly how liability works on the high seas. Here is our roadmap for today's Explainer. 1. Who are the real players? 2. Special and dangerous cargo. 3. Who pays when things break? 4. Standard liability versus USCO GSA. And 5. The Singapore court jurisdiction.
Section 1. Who are the real players? The shield and the sword.
Okay, let's jump right in. The entire relationship out there hinges on the Bill of Lading, or the BL. And you've got to remember, this isn't just a receipt. It is the absolute, ultimate legal document governing the relationship between the carrier and the merchant. Notice that last part right there? Superseding prior agreements. All those handshakes and emails from 3 months ago? Yeah, they're pretty much useless now. Once the goods are handed over, this document is the definitive rulebook for the whole shebang.
Now look at the incredible contrast in how the two sides are defined here. On one side, you have the carrier, which is a single, protected entity, Ocean Network Express, PTE Limited. But then you look at the merchant? Wow! That definition casts a massive net. It includes the shipper, the consignee, the owner, receiver, holder of the bill, non-vessel operating common carriers, and even freight forwarders. Why does this actually matter to us? Because anyone under this giant umbrella is jointly and severally liable. Basically, the carrier has a very, very long list of people they can hold legally and financially responsible.
Section 2. Special and dangerous cargo rules. What if things heat up?
So if you're shipping anything that requires refrigeration, ventilation, or any kind of special attention, the burden falls squarely on you, the merchant. The source material is crystal clear on this. The merchant is fully responsible for properly packing the container, making absolutely sure the thermostatic controls are exactly set, and providing prior written notice of the required temperature range. Think about it. If your container full of premium frozen seafood thaws out and ruins the cargo because you didn't set the dials perfectly, or maybe forgot the written notice, the carrier is completely off the hook. In fact, they don't even guarantee the maintenance of the intended temperature inside the container.
And if we're talking about shipping dangerous goods, explosives, flammables, hazardous materials, the rules get even stricter. There's a mandatory, absolutely non-negotiable 3-step protocol that has to happen before your goods can even touch the vessel. First, you need the carrier's acceptance of a prior written application. Second, the dangerous nature of the goods must be distinctly and permanently marked on the outside of the packaging. And third, they must be packed to withstand the specific intense risks of ocean carriage.
So what happens if you bend these rules, or conveniently forget to declare your hazardous cargo? The financial consequences are absolutely brutal. The carrier has the total right to handle the situation however they see fit. They can render the goods innocuous, discharge them, abandon them, or just dispose of them without giving you a single dime. Or, and I am literally not exaggerating here, they can quite literally throw your cargo overboard into the ocean. And to add insult to injury, you're the one who has to indemnify the carrier for the costs of tossing your stuff.
Section 3. Who pays when things break? The blame game.
Merchants, you are facing a serious uphill battle here. The terms contain this extensive list of exemptions that act as an almost impenetrable legal shield for the carrier. They are totally relieved of liability for acts of God or war, quarantine restrictions, insufficient packing by the merchant, the inherent vice of the goods themselves, or even fire. Unless, of course, you can specifically prove the fire was caused by the carrier's actual fault. The carrier's legal armor is just incredibly thick.
But hey, let's say you do manage to prove the carrier messed up. You're still not getting a blank check from them. The terms dictate this concept of pro rata fault.
If the damage was caused partly by the carrier and partly by something else, let's say it's a mix of the carrier's mishandling and a really bad storm, the carrier is only liable for the exact portion of the damage that you can mathematically prove resulted from their specific fault. The burden of proof rests heavily on the merchant to prove exactly how much the carrier is to blame.
Section 4. Standard liability versus U.S. COSGA, the math of the catch. Brace yourselves for this one. $500. If your shipment touches the United States, meaning it falls under U.S. COGSA, which is the U.S. Carriage of Goods by Sea Act, the carrier's maximum liability is strictly capped at just $500 per package. It absolutely doesn't matter if that package contains $500 worth of cheap plastic toys or $50,000 worth of luxury watches. Unless you take some very specific preventative steps, $500 per package is the absolute maximum you are going to recover.
Global liability really all comes down to your specific route. If you aren't shipping to or from the U.S., you generally fall under the Hague Rules for the waterborne carriage portion, which caps liability at 2 special drawing rights per kilo, or $100 per unit. But look closely at USCOGSA. It applies to the entire carriage of U.S. shipments, so not just the time actually out on the water, and it strictly limits liability to that flat $500 per package we just talked about.
So, how on earth do you protect yourself from these devastatingly low financial caps? Well, the contract offers one and only one escape hatch. To bypass the Hague limits or that U.S. COGSA $500 limit, the merchant must declare the true nature and value of the goods up front, entirely before the goods are received by the carrier. That declared value has to be inserted into the bill of lading, and most importantly, the merchant must pay extra freight charges. If you don't do all of this before the journey begins, you're automatically subject to the lowest liability caps.
Section 5. The Singapore Court Jurisdiction. The end of the line. Well, you better have your passport ready. Clause 25.1 explicitly states, unless otherwise agreed by the carrier, any action against the carrier under here must be brought exclusively before the Singapore High Court. For the vast majority of global shipments under this contract, if you want to take legal action against one, you simply cannot do it in your local courts. You are legally bound to take your entire dispute to Singapore.
There is one major exception here, though. Once again, the United States carves out its own legal territory. For shipments specifically to or from the United States, its districts, territories, and possessions, the contract is governed by U.S. law. This is a genuinely crucial distinction that completely changes the legal battlefield depending on exactly where your cargo is headed.
Okay, we have unpacked a lot today. We've gone through the massive definitions, the incredibly strict rules for special cargo, the giant liability exemptions, those shocking $500 U.S. COGSA limits, and the inevitable journey to the Singapore High Court. So I want to leave you with this final thought to consider for your own logistics operations. Knowing the fine print of these terms and conditions, is your bottom line truly protected through proper declarations and comprehensive cargo insurance? Or are you honestly just one bad storm away from financially sinking? It might be time to take a much closer look at your own shipping contracts. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.